For the first time since COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, what the Chinese call temple fairs are back, and they're bustling in Beijing, selling everything from toys to lamb kebabs.
I'll splurge because it's a special occasion, but I cannot afford to spend like this ordinarily.
I was only planning to buy one stick, but it's 50 yuan for two, so I decided to buy two.
Despite the 4-year hiatus, vendors have not raised prices, and some are even offering discounts. Deflation, which could lead to higher unemployment and shrinking profits, is a constant worry for the world's second-largest economy. Shop prices last month had their steepest decline since the 2009 financial crisis. Consumer spending gets a boost during the Lunar New Year holiday here in China. Temple fairs like this with food stalls and souvenir shops draw big crowds. But the impact may be short-lived as the economy struggles to recover. One key indicator during the Lunar New Year is pork, a popular meal on dinner tables at family reunions. Meat shops in Beijing say sales have been slow in the lead-up to the holidays, and consumption fell by 1 million tons last year. On social media, Chinese people have been vocal about their financial difficulties.
Do you know how pathetic people in debt are? It's the eve of the Chinese New Year, and I'm here wandering on the streets, nowhere to go.
Court records show that close to 9 million Chinese have been barred from mobile payment apps for missing installments on loans. Youth unemployment rose to a record 21.3% last October. The government is stepping in with measures aimed at boosting the stock market and property sales. Economic expansion did hit the government's target of 5% last year, but the International Monetary Fund predicts slower growth in the next 4 years. For now, many Chinese are welcoming the Year of the Dragon with a spending spree, or at least some affordable indulgence. Barnaby, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Well, let's take a closer look at the state of the world's second-largest economy. Following 3 years of strict COVID-19 prevention policies, China's GDP increased 5.2% last year. That's still one of its lowest rates of growth in 3 decades. Many economists are concerned about deflation. Signals a stagnating economy leads to higher unemployment, increased debts, lower profits. New figures show that consumer prices in China fell by 0.8% in January, compared with the same period last year, which suggests dangerous deflationary pressure there in action. And that was the 4th straight month of falling prices, the biggest fall in prices since the 2009 financial crisis. Analysts are now looking at whether the Year of the Dragon this year will breathe some much-needed fire into the Chinese economy. Well, let's bring in Wang. She's the Chief Economist at Hang Seng Bank. She joins us now from New York. Ms. Wang, it feels like this Lunar New Year was a little less festive in China, and given the levels of youth unemployment that we're seeing, perhaps some rather awkward conversations over family reunion dinners there?
Well, there are a lot of concerns surrounding this new year because it's not just the lower pork prices, it's also the concerns about the future job security and also the potential that many companies might be in deeper debt. So there is a lack of policy response throughout 2023, and a lot of people fear that with this kind of policy, we might see further downturn in the housing market and stock market.
Well, how much has the housing crisis actually driven this? Do you actually see a bottom?
Well, the housing market has been the main drag for China's economic recovery since 2021. And I think the situation might have to last all the way through 2026.
Wow.
Because the local governments have been quite keen to keep the housing prices from falling too fast. But the longer they do this, the more cautious potential home buyers will be. So they will only wait before they get into the market again.
Sure. What should we read, do you think, into the deflationary trends we're seeing? Is this a question of consumer confidence with people saving more, or are people actually struggling to get by now?
Well, I don't think people are really struggling to get by because, as we know, Chinese households are still the most liquid in the world. On average, the Chinese savings rate is still the highest among all the emerging markets. And right now, there's about 140 trillion RMB saved in Chinese commercial banks. But that part of the saving, we have to notice, it's concentrated on the top 20%, not the bottom 50%. Oh. So that created more redistribution of income inequality, and that could be a future concern.
There have been allegations that Beijing is hiding numbers, that there's been some kind of crackdown, censorship of critics of the economy, including several prominent economists and other figures. How much faith do you have in the published numbers that we're getting from the government?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as the government are faking data. But when we interpret the data, such as the GDP, we have to be cautious because the definition of GDP in China is actually by production, not by demand. It's collected from all the major enterprises in industries. And the things that are produced are very different from the income that people actually earn. And that's why we have this big gap between the macro data and micro perceptions.
Oh, very interesting. Do you think, given the current context and the trends that people are seeing on the ground and in their own pocketbooks, is any of that affecting the political opinion there on the ground, especially of the leadership?
Well, when we look at actual sentiment in China, there is a surprising calm because with this kind of youth unemployment in most cities in China, especially big cities, you would expect more discontent. But actually, because the prices have been going down, with the same amount of money, the bundle of goods people are buying actually is more than before, and the quality are improving. And that's one of the main reasons that people are not demanding structural changes, because the life quality is still improving. And when we look at the macro data, housing prices are more or less stabilized, although it's still going down. And the government is quite keen in providing more social security. That includes medical care, pensions, and there are a lot of efforts also on the local government. And that means there's still a buffer for the society in China.
Very interesting dynamics there. Dan Wang, the Chief Economist at Hang Seng Bank, speaking to us from New York. Always great to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us again on Al Jazeera.